Hello friends, and welcome back to the next Power BI DAX video. This time we'd like to dive deeper into ranking in Power BI. So let's say we have different kinds of categories here in our dataset, and you would like to know what is their sales ranking. Could also be their profit ranking or any other kind of measure you want to have and want to evaluate. So the first I like to do is I like to click on the plus symbol here just to create a new page. And then I simply right click on the page and say rename. The same would be true if you simply double click on the page. You could also rename it like that. And then simply type in a new name, like for instance here, sales ranking. So now let's actually create the measure. But before we do that, let's actually visualize something. Let's start with the table. Of course, you could use any other kind of visualization. However, when learning DAX, I think it's always best to have a table, because then you can see the numbers and see whether that works or not. So I would go with the table. I select my table icon here, table. And now I have my scaffold here. And now I simply go to the orders table, and in the orders table we have a category. So I can tick my category here. And currently I think it's a little bit small, so let me just go to the formatting option here and adjust also under the values here the size, so you can see that better on your screens hopefully. So the text size is simply 15. So far so good. Now we can see the categories, and by default they are ranked alphabetically. So starting with cheese and ending with meat. So let's actually visualize maybe one of our measures, which is in our case the total sales. So I go the measures table and simply tick the total sales. And let's actually go back in here. So now we can see the total sales for each of the categories. And if you like to sort it, you can hover over total sales here. Then you should see a little down arrow here. And if you click on it, then you sort it now by the number itself. And then we can see that the drinks are actually the category with the highest amount of sales. And the cookies, on the other hand, are the category with the lowest amount of sales. So far so good. Now let's actually create our ranking measure. Now, if I right click on my measures table here, I can say I'd like to create a new measure. Here we go, just a second. And now we can simply name this. Let's call this sales ranking, like that. And now it's equal to. And now there's a function which is so-called rank x function in DAX. Now, whenever we're dealing with x functions, we already know from the prior videos that these functions are so-called iterator functions. That means that these iterator functions always need a table as their first argument, and we can also see this in the description here. Beside this, we have a little, text here which tells us what this rank x function actually does. It returns the rank of an expression evaluated in the current context in a list of values for the expression evaluated for each row in a specific table. Now, either you get it or not, but let's actually try it out and find out what this can do for us. So for the rank function, we need a table, as we've said, as a first argument. Now let's actually do first maybe the orders table. Okay, so type in orders table here. We have to adjust this later on, but for now let's try the orders table. So then we can give it an expression. In our case, we said that we would like to do it with the total sales. Of course, you can also do it with any other kind of measure you have. Now let's say I'm going with the total sales. I can type in total sales, and then I can see my total sales up there, and simply press tab key and I select it. The other arguments, because they are in brackets, are optional. So I will skip the value, simply skip it with a second comma, but for the orders I'd like to adjust this, because I like to have the order descending. Why? Because I like to have my highest amount of sales actually ranking number 1. So drinks should be number 1, cookies should be the last one. This is why I type in descending here, because ascending is the default one. And for the ties, I also skip this. You can, if you click in here, you can see there's dense and there's skip. It depends on how you want to deal with if two measures would, in this case, have the same amount of sales. Then these two options you have, whether you want to skip it or do you want to have a dense ranking. For us now, that doesn't matter because we have different sales. So simply can close the parenthesis here, and let's actually try that out. So we are ranking our orders table based on the sales measure here, and we like to do the descending. I press enter to create the measure, and we got our measure ranking. So let's actually go back to the table, and now I select my ranking here. And let's see what happens. If I tick this, I can see that I get a sales ranking of 1 for all my categories here. So why is that? Where is actually the issue? Well, always think of, if you have a visual, then there is context, a so-called filter context. And this is exactly what happens here. So for each row in this table, we have a context. A filter context, which is the category itself. So for instance, drinks, cheese, desserts, and so on. So each of the category acts as a filter context for the specific row of data we have. Now, what happens if we take a look back at our measure, if I take the sales ranking one more time, what we basically do here is we rank the orders table. However, because we have a filter context here, that means that the orders table gets pre-filtered based on the specific category we have here. That means for the ranking, for the first entry, for instance, for the strings, the orders table gets pre-filtered to the category drinks, and then the ranking is calculated. However, if we only have drinks as a category in the orders table, then of course the ranking for this category will always be 1, because there is only one category, right? And the same is true for all the other categories we have here. So for cheese, the orders table, as we have specified it here, would be filtered first to cheese, and then based on this filter table, the ranking of cheese would be done. And again, we would only have cheese as category. The other categories are not in the orders table anymore because it's pre-filtered. And then, of course, the ranking for one category is always 1. This is why we have this behavior here. So how can we change this? Well, there is a function which is a so-called all function. So if you type in all here and parentheses, you see that the all function either takes a table or a column, and it returns all the rows in a table or all the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied. And this is exactly what we need, because we need to ignore here filters, the filter context coming from the table. So drinks, cheese, desserts, and so on. So to ignore this or these specific categories, we can simply wrap our orders table, and within our orders table, a specific column, which is our category column. So wrap in this orders table and modify our specific sales ranking function like this. So this means that now we still do the ranking. However, because we set it all, or wrap the orders category here into all, that means that now the filter context which we have here, like drinks, cheese, and so on, this gets ignored. And this means that the ranking now, the orders table itself here, is not pre-filtered. We take into account all the categories and then do our ranking based on total sales. And this means that now we don't get ones for every category because we removed the external, in this case, this kind of filter. So let's actually try that out. If I press enter here now, then now we can see we got here sales rankings from 1 to 8, right? So the highest is this one and the lowest is this one. So this is exactly what we wanted to have. Now, one additional thing you might think of is, well, what about the total row here? Because the sales ranking is now correct. However, we still see for the total 1, simply because here this sum is evaluated and it simply returns 1 here. Now, what can we do? Well, we could wrap our formula into another function, a DAX calculation, just to get rid of the 1. So simply display nothing here. How can we do this? Well, let's actually go to our sales rank one more time, and let's wrap this in an if condition. And what we basically check is simply, do we have in the current row a category or not? So if there's a category, like for instance for drinks, cheese, and so on, until cookies, then we would like to see the ranking. If there's no category, which for total, for instance, is true, right? There is no category, it's simply total, then we don't want to display anything. So what we do is we wrap this in an if function. So simply type in if here, and then we need a logical test. And a logical test will be is in scope. There's a function called is in scope, returns true when their specific column is the level in a hierarchy of levels. So you can use this function. By the way, you could also use has one value. There's another function which is called has one value, and this could also be used. But in my case, I'm using is in scope function. So then I'm referring to my category itself, so the orders table category, because this is the one which we currently have here in our table. So if that's in scope, and only if that's in scope, if this is true, then we say that what we want to return if it's true. So I go into a new line here, press Shift Enter to go to a new line, and then I want to do the ranking. If that's not the case, otherwise, so if false, go into a new line here again and say, then I would like to see a blank. There's a function called blank that simply means that don't display anything. And now if you close the parenthesis here and you press enter, then you'll see that now the 1 is gone here in the visual, right? As you can see here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the 1 here is simply blank because there is no scope for category. So one more time, the measure itself, like that. So basically we test here if we have a scope of category, which is true for all the entries until the last one. The total is not in scope. Then we would like to see our ranking, which we've done. Otherwise, don't display anything And for in DAX, for don't display anything, there's simply a function called blank. Okay, so that's it for the sales ranking. Now, maybe you would like to ask another question. What if I like to have my sales ranking dynamic? Meaning, what if I like to give the report consumer the option to simply select the top 3 of categories, or the top 5, whatever he or she wants? Well, in order to do this, we can go under modeling here, and under modeling there is a so-called what if parameter. So let's actually do this. Let's go to a new parameter here, a ticket, and then you'll see that a new window appears here. Now this window allows us to specify a name for the parameter. Let's call it sales, or let's call it top sales rank. Okay, of course, feel free to name it whatever you like. Unfortunately, I can't make it bigger, but hopefully you can see this on your screens. The data type itself is a whole number. That is fine, because we would like to have ranks between 1, and in our case we know the maximum is 8. So I can say the minimum is 1, and the maximum here is simply 8, because we have 8 categories here. The increment itself is 1, that's fine, because I would like to select 1, 2, 3, and so on. And the default value, for now I leave it blank. And then you can simply decide whether you want to add the slicer to the page or not. In my case, I leave it checked, so we get a slicer. So if you click OK, you will see that a new table gets created. So let me actually click OK, just a second. And now we have a slicer here, or a slider here, which you can simply use here to slide the specific ranks. Of course, you can also type a number directly, like 6, and you can see that also works. What I meant is, if I make the orders table a little bit smaller, you'll see that here is a new table, which is a total sales rank. This is exactly the table which has been created using this DAX function, so you can also create it yourself if you want. You can write this function to get the same result, this new table. But this happens basically when you do the modeling and go to new parameter, so the what if parameter. Then you create this kind of DAX expression automatically, and you can also add the slider to the page. You can also take a look at the table if you want. So if I go to the data view here, and I select the top sales rank table, you'll see that it's actually only a table with one line here, with simply the numbers from 1 to 8. That's everything. So a simple table. But we can use this table now. If I go back to the view here, we can now say, instead of our sales ranking, which we have here, we can actually do this dynamically. And the idea is that we simply right-click on a new measure here and say, I would like to create a new measure. And this measure will be top X sales is equal to, and I will simply check again with an if condition. So if, in this case, the top, or if actually, do it this way, other way around. So if our sales ranking here is less or equal to the selection based on the slider we have, and remember this comes from top sales ranking from this table. So if you search for top sales ranking, where is it? Actually, just a second, is equal to the name itself is top sales. So top, there is it. Top sales rank. Just a second, one more time. Top sales rank, here it is. So if this is the case, then and only then we would like to see the total sales. Total sales, here we go. Otherwise, if that's not the case, we don't want to display anything. So let's say we'd like to see a blank. And I close this. So this formula. And what we basically do is we simply check the sales ranking here and in comparison to the total sales rank value. Now the second argument, this one here, this is referring to our slider, okay? And only if the ranking itself, we simply check the ranking itself, which are the ranks from 1 to 8 in our table. If this ranking is less or equal to the slider, so in this case it would be less or equal to 6, and only then we would like to see the total sales. Otherwise we don't want to show anything. So this is the formula. Let's actually press enter to create it. And here we go. We got our top X sales. And now if I simply let me Control-C, Control-V to paste it, so you have it twice in the resources. So now if I add the measure which we have created, our top X sales, we can simply take this. Let me actually take it here. And you see that now we don't see, let me actually maybe move this a little bit like that. We don't see all the values. We only see the top 6 values, because we currently have here 6. And if I say I only like to see my top 3, press 3 here, I'll put in the 3, or drag the slider to 3, press enter, and you'll see that now you only see the top 3 sales. So this is a way to make this dynamic in the view. And just in case you're wondering, well, I still see the blanks here. Well, that's not what I want. Of course, the reason for this is because in this view, we still have the total sales as well as the ranking. These two. So if we remove from this view the total sales at first, and then also the ranking, let's also remove the ranking, cross symbol here. Now we see only the top 3 in here, right? And now if you make it bigger, for instance, let's say I would like to see my top sales, top 5, in this case categories by sales, then you see that this view adjusts exactly the way you want it, without any blanks inside, right? And this is a way how you can make this dynamic and also apply under modeling these what-if parameters. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Hopefully you understood what we did. If not, feel free to ask in the comment section. And as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I hopefully see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.